Our movie starts today in Japan, specifically in the city of Tokyo. Just so you know, Tokyo is one of the most advanced cities in the world, where everything operates using technology and is fully powered by electricity. Keep this point in mind throughout the movie. Now, we shift to Mr. Suzuki, who works at a prestigious company. After finishing his work for the day, he returns home where he lives with his wife Mitsu, his young daughter Yui, and his older son Kanji. We see that the family isn't very close, as they're always glued to their phones and social media, leaving little time for real communication with each other. At the end of the day, the whole family goes to sleep. The next morning, when they all wake up, they suddenly discover that there's no electricity at all. Everything that runs on electricity has stopped working. No one knows the cause, but people assume it's a normal power outage and that the electricity will come back soon. Suzuki doesn't give it much thought, takes his kids Yui and Kanji, and they leave the house so he can go to work and they can go to school. Suzuki says goodbye to his kids and heads to the subway, but when he arrives he finds the subway is down due to the power outage. So, Suzuki decides to walk all the way to work, even though it's pretty far. When he gets to the company, he sees all the employees standing outside because the electronic gate isn't working due to the power outage. 2 employees decide to break the door open, and that's exactly what they do. They manage to get inside the company, but the problem isn't solved since no one can actually work without power. The boss lets everyone know they can go home for the day. Since there are no working transportation options, Suzuki is forced to buy a bicycle to ride back home. Meanwhile, we see Kanji heading to his university on his bike, as usual. Along the way, Kanji notices that all the cars are stalled, and he overhears drivers talking about how their car battery suddenly died, leaving them unable to drive. But Kanji keeps going and eventually reaches the university. He searches for Nakuru, the girl he's really into, but unfortunately, she isn't there because of the power outage. This leaves Kanji feeling pretty down, as he really likes her. We leave Kanji for a moment and turn to Yui. She goes to her school, but the power is out there too, so no teachers could make it to school today. Yui decides to go back home. Speaking of home, we see Mitsu, Kanji and Yui's mom, standing with a few of the neighbors from the building. They're all worried about the power outage and decide to head to the market to buy some essentials like candles and water, knowing that the water will also be cut off soon since it's powered by electric pumps. Mitsu heads to the market, buys everything they might need, and returns home. After a short while, the whole family gathers at home by candlelight. They're all frustrated because of the power outage, but they try to reassure themselves, hoping that the electricity will come back soon. Unfortunately, the power doesn't return. The next day, we see Suzuki going to work, but once again, the electricity is out. Suzuki's boss, Waki, shows up and informs everyone that the power issue might take a while to resolve. As a result, he tells them they should leave and only return when the electricity is restored. Later, the boss talks to Suzuki privately, advising him to leave Tokyo because it's no longer safe. Suzuki initially dismisses the idea, but as he's leaving the office, he notices that his boss is taking his wife and kids and seems to be leaving the city. Suzuki asks him where they're going, and the boss explains that he's heading to a city in the mountains because they have a water source up there. He also mentions that Tokyo will soon run out of water, making Suzuki worry. He starts considering leaving the city too. On the other side, Yui goes to her school, but, as usual, no teachers have shown up because of the power outage. Realizing this, she decides to leave. Mitsu, on the other hand, wants to get some water, but the workers at the water station tell her, and everyone else, that the pumps have stopped working. As a result, they can't give anyone water, and everyone walks away feeling very disappointed. Meanwhile, Kenji goes to the house of Nakamori, the girl he likes, to talk to her. But before he does, he's caught off guard and hides so she doesn't see him. He avoids the situation and moves on. Another day passes, and still, there's no power. Suzuki and Mitsu decide to hold a meeting with all the residents of the building to figure out what to do. Unfortunately, after much talking, no one comes up with a solution. Suzuki goes back to his apartment and sits with his wife, Kenji, and Yui. He starts thinking, and in the end, makes a decision. He tells everyone that they need to leave and head to the countryside to stay with Mitsu's grandfather because there's a water source there, and they'll be able to survive. Initially, everyone resists the idea, but Suzuki insists. The next day, Suzuki, Mitsu, Kenji, and Yui pack up and head out on 3 bicycles, making their way to the airport where they plan to catch a flight to the countryside. After some time, they get thirsty and need water, so they stop at a store selling water. The shopkeeper is very greedy, taking advantage of the situation and charging a lot of money. But Mitsu, being a savvy woman, negotiates with him and manages to get the water for a reasonable price. They continue their journey and finally reach the airport, but as soon as they arrive, they find a huge crowd gathered outside with no planes flying. On top of that, the airport security is pushing people away. A fight breaks out, and the situation escalates. Suzuki and his family can't handle the chaos, so they decide to leave. They keep walking until they come across a hotel and decide to spend the night there. They book a room and settle in. Suzuki talks to his family, explaining that there's no other choice. They must continue their journey to the countryside by bike. Everyone is upset by this, but they eventually agree because there's no other option. The next day, Kenji and Yui go to a bookstore to get maps that will help them on their journey. At the same time, Suzuki and Mitsu visit a woman who sells rice and also happens to have a spare bike. Suzuki and Mitsu ask her for the bike and a bag of rice. The woman agrees, but in exchange, she takes a bottle of water and a few bottles of alcohol from them. With the 4th bike secured, the whole family now has bicycles, and they set off toward the countryside. As they travel, they get onto the highway, where they find many people walking, also migrating out of Tokyo. They continue walking with the crowd until they get tired and stop to rest. A couple sits down next to them, clearly hungry and thirsty. They ask Suzuki and his family if they have any food or water. Even though Suzuki and his family have a small supply of provisions, they refuse to share, worried that their supplies won't last long enough. Of course, they feel bad for doing so. At night, everyone went to sleep, except that it didn't take long for Kingi to wake up to a sound beside him. When he looked over, he saw someone stealing a bottle of water from their bags. Of course, Kingi went crazy and started chasing the guy. Eventually, he caught up with him and saw the guy sitting with his wife and young child, giving them the stolen water to drink. Kingi felt bad for them and decided not to do anything. He left the place and walked away. The next day, Suzuki, Kingi, and the rest of the family continued their journey towards the countryside. Along the way, they came across a tunnel they had to go through. At the entrance, there were some elderly women who told Suzuki and the others that the tunnel was too dark, and they wouldn't be able to walk through it. One of the women offered to guide them through the tunnel in exchange for food or drink, but Suzuki and the others refused. They decided to go through the tunnel by themselves. However, they soon found that it was pitch black inside, and there were many parked cars they kept bumping into. In the end, they were forced to hire one of the elderly women who knew the tunnel well. She guided them through safely. Afterward, the group stopped to rest. Everything seemed fine until they realized they had run out of food and water, and even their matches for lighting fires were almost gone. Everyone felt discouraged, knowing they would need supplies soon, but they kept moving forward anyway. Suddenly, the weather changed, and a storm hit the area they were walking through. They had to leave their bikes and belongings on the side and take shelter from the storm. Unfortunately, the storm knocked over their bikes and the remaining supplies. Once the storm passed, they tried to gather whatever was left, but everything had been ruined, and even Kingi's bike was broken. Kingi and Yui were forced to enter an abandoned shop to search for anything useful. All they found was pet food for cats and dogs, some distilled water from car batteries, and a distress flare used at sea in case of a shipwreck. They took what they could and went back to Suzuki and Mitsu. Together, they fixed Kingi's bike and regrouped before continuing on their way. Later on, they reached a bridge and decided to rest again. There, they met a strange family standing at the bridge. This family had adapted to the current situation and lived off what nature provided. They even ate and drank from natural sources. The family gave Suzuki and his group some tips on how to survive. After that, Suzuki and his family continued their journey, now accompanied by the other family. Along the way, they encountered a group of soldiers. Suzuki stopped to talk to them and asked about the energy crisis and when it would be resolved, but the soldiers didn't have any information. They moved on, leaving Suzuki and his family behind. After a while, the strange family left Suzuki's group, and Suzuki and his family continued toward the countryside. Not long after, Suzuki and his family arrived in a city, hoping to find food or water. However, the city was completely abandoned, a clear sign that there was no food or water to be found, as the residents had already left. This realization caused Yui to break down, blaming her father, Suzuki, for not being able to provide for them. Suzuki was deeply affected by her words but remained silent and did nothing. They pushed their problems aside and continued their journey. Eventually, they reached another city, where they found a man cooking and distributing food to people. They were overjoyed and stood in line, waiting for their turn. But by the time they reached the front of the line, the man ran out of food. They were devastated. Suzuki pleaded with the man, begging him to give something to his children. He even knelt down and kissed the man's feet, but the man genuinely had nothing left to give and didn't care about their plight, so he left them and walked away. Mitsu, Kingi, and Yui comforted Suzuki, and they all set off once again. They continued walking until they reached a rural area where they spotted a wild boar roaming free. Everyone got incredibly excited and started chasing the boar, trying to catch it. After a long chase, Suzuki finally managed to catch the pig in what was practically a miracle. They were just about to slaughter the pig so they could eat it, but before they could, an old man named Tanaka arrived at the scene and stopped them. Tanaka slaughtered the pig himself, took it with them, and brought Suzuki and his family back to his farm. Once there, Tanaka explained that the pig they found was his, and not just that, but many other pigs had escaped from his farm. Tanaka offered them food and drink on the condition that they help him with the farm work and also search for the remaining pigs that had run away. Of course, Suzuki and the others agreed. The first thing they did was eat a huge meal from Tanaka's food, as if they hadn't eaten in years. Afterward, they began working with him on the farm, and the work was extremely tough. But eventually, they managed to find all the escaped pigs and bring them back to the farm. At that point, Tanaka spoke to them, offering them a place to stay if they wanted to live with him, since he was alone and needed people to live with him. Although Tanaka's offer was tempting, Suzuki refused. Suzuki spoke to Mitsu and his family, explaining that he turned down the offer because they needed to go to Mitsu's grandfather and check on him. Suzuki asked them what they thought, and everyone agreed with him. So, they gathered some supplies from Tanaka, bid him a heartfelt farewell, and set off on their journey to Mitsu's grandfather. They kept walking until they reached a lake, which they needed to cross in order to continue their journey. The problem was that the lake was deep, not a small one. After some thinking, Suzuki came up with a plan. They would leave their cart on this side of the lake, take their bags and supplies on a wooden raft they built, and cross to the other side. Then, Suzuki would return to bring the cart the same way. Everyone agreed to the plan, and Suzuki successfully transported the supplies and his family to the other side safely. He then returned to get the cart. While he was crossing with the cart, a strong current suddenly pulled Suzuki away, and he disappeared in front of everyone's eyes. They knew, unfortunately, that he had drowned. They searched for him but couldn't find him, leaving everyone deeply saddened. Despite their grief, they had no choice but to continue their journey. Soon after, the family was attacked by a pack of dogs, which tried to snatch the food from Mitsu's bag. During the attack, Mitsu fell off a small cliff and injured her leg. Kenji and Yui quickly took her and kept moving, but they were startled when the dogs approached them again. They sat on a railway track, waiting for the dogs to attack them, but fortunately, that didn't happen. Suddenly, an old coal-powered train appeared, making a loud noise that scared the dogs away. The train stopped, and it turned out that the government was using it as temporary transportation until power was restored. Kenji, Yui, and Mitsu boarded the train, which took off with them. Meanwhile, we see that Suzuki didn't actually die. The current had carried him to a shore, and he regained consciousness, unharmed. Shortly after, he saw the train approaching, and yes, it was the same train that carried Mitsu, Kenji, and Yui. Suzuki lit the signal flare that Kenji had gotten from the market, and the people on the train saw it, stopping for him. Kenji and Yui reunited with their father, and everyone was overjoyed to finally be together again. Not long after, Suzuki, Mitsu, Kenji, and Yui reached Mitsu's grandfather. They finally settled down with him in peace and comfort. Suzuki and Kenji began working with Mitsu's grandfather and the villagers in fishing, while Mitsu and Yui helped the women of the village with spinning and weaving. Their lives were very happy, and they stayed in the village for over 2 full years. One day, everyone woke up to some great news: the electricity had finally returned to the world. No one really knew why the power had been out for so long, but it had finally come back. With that, Suzuki and his family returned to their home in Tokyo and resumed their lives as they had been before. But this time, they were different. They were much happier, and they always stayed connected with each other, unlike before. Everything they went through taught them the value of staying connected. And that's how our movie ends today. I hope you all enjoyed it. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you liked the video.